minus 76 degrees Celsius. The kind of cold where your eyelashes freeze shut between blinks and the air itself becomes a blade drawn slowly across every inch of exposed skin. I was the one who found her. I need you to understand that before anything else. I was the one who walked out at first light and saw the shape in the snow. Two shapes, actually, neither of them moving.
We are almost there.
The drift had climbed halfway up the mare's flank.
Just a little further.
Frost coated the animal's muzzle like white glass, and curled against its neck, arms locked around its throat as if holding on to something holier than survival, was Sardaana Alexeyeva. 93 years old, 61 kilograms, her deerskin gloves frozen stiff around the horse's mane. She was breathing, shallow, impossibly slow, a faint cloud that the wind stole the moment it left her lips. The mare was breathing too. I could see the ribs move beneath the ice-crusted hide. I dropped to my knees beside them. The snow went through my trousers instantly, a pain so sharp it felt like a burn. Sardaana's face was the color of old birch bark. Gray-white, the skin pulled tight over her cheekbones. Her eyes were closed. Her lips had cracked and bled, the blood frozen into a thin, dark line. I did not know yet what had happened. I did not know she had crawled more than 300 meters through the dark. I did not know the horse had been down for over 5 hours. Its left foreleg twisted in a crevice beneath the permafrost. I did not know any of it. All I knew was that a woman older than most trees in this valley had chosen the coldest night of the winter to leave her shelter and die beside an animal she loved. What follows is how she got there. I have pieced it together from her own words, from the tracks in the snow before the wind erased them, and from the small details. The half-eaten bowl of dried fish inside the shelter, the overturned lantern, the door left unlatched. Every fact matters. In cold like this, the margin between life and death is measured in minutes, in single decisions, in whether you lace your boots or leave them loose. She has survived 93 winters. She did not intend to lose this one, not like this, not alone. 12 hours earlier, Sardaana's camp sat quiet in the last gray light of the afternoon. A single shelter of large poles and layered reindeer hides tucked into the lee side of a ridge the Yakut call Kaiskaya, which means cold stone.
I had visited her there the previous autumn. The shelter is no larger than a modest room, and everything inside it serves a purpose. A cast iron stove the size of a bread box, fed with dried dung and whatever scrub wood she can drag from the valley. A sleeping platform raised off the frozen ground by a hand width, lined with elk pelts worn soft by Dick. A tin kettle black with soot. A photograph, cracked and faded, of a man standing beside a young horse. Her late husband Pyotr, dead, now 31 years, and the dam of the very mare tethered outside. The mare's name is Kaidelik. It means crane, the bird, the white one that returns each spring to the Yakut wetlands. Sardaana named her the day she was foaled 14 years ago because the filly had stood up on legs so long and unsteady she looked like a bird learning to walk on frozen water. Kaidelik is small by any standard outside Yakutia. Yakut horses are built for endurance, not speed. Their coats grow so thick in winter that snow lands on their backs and does not melt. Their blood runs warmer than any European breed. They have thrived in this region for thousands of years, without heated barns, without blankets, without human intervention. And yet, Sardaana treats this horse as if it were made of glass.
She knows my voice before she sees me, even in the dark, even in the wind. I open the door, she turns her head, every morning for 14 years.
That afternoon, the temperature sat at minus 62. Cold, certainly. Dangerous, always. Sardaana had fed the stove, boiled water, eaten a portion of dried fish and hard bread. She had gone outside twice. Once to check Kaidelik's tether and sweep the snow from the horse's back with a birch broom. Once to relieve herself downwind of the shelter. Each trip lasted no more than 4 minutes. At those temperatures, 4 minutes is a discipline, not a choice. The sky was a flat iron sheet from horizon to horizon. No stars, no break in the cloud. The wind had been steady from the northeast all day, perhaps 20 kilometers per hour, enough to push the wind chill past minus 70. Sardaana knew what was coming. She has read weather her entire life, the way other people read books. Not by instruments or forecasts, but by the taste of the air, the behavior of the animals, the sound the wind makes when it changes direction against the ridge. She told me later that the wind shifted twice between noon and dusk. A double shift means the storm is not passing through, it is settling in.
She fed the stove again. She sealed the door flap with a strip of hide. She placed an extra layer of felt over the sleeping platform, and she spoke to Kaidalik through the wall, a low murmur that the horse answered with a soft exhalation, barely audible above the wind. Sleep well, old friend. I will see you in the morning. That was the last ordinary moment, the last breath of peace before the dark came down in full. The blizzard arrived just after 8 in the evening. It did not build gradually. It struck the ridge like a fist, a wall of wind and ice crystals so dense that the air itself turned white. The shelter shuddered. The hide walls bowed inward. The stove flue screamed as the draft reversed and pushed a tongue of smoke back into the room. Sardaana sat up from her sleeping platform and pressed her palm flat against the wall. She could feel the temperature dropping through the hide. A cold so aggressive it seemed to pull the warmth from her hand, the way a river pulls soil from a bank. Outside, the temperature plunged. Minus 68. Minus 70. Minus 73. At these extremes, the physics of survival change. Exposed skin suffers frostbite in under 2 minutes. Breath crystallizes before it leaves the mouth and falls as a fine powder. The Yakut call the whisper of stars. Steel becomes so brittle it can snap like dry wood. The mucous membranes of the nose and throat begin to crack, and each inhalation feels like swallowing broken glass. And then not the wind, not the wind. Not the shelter walls, something from outside, sharp and high, cutting through the roar of the storm like a needle through cloth. A horse screaming. Sardaana was at the door before the sound died. Her hands fumbled with the hide lashing, fingers already numb from the cold that had seeped through the walls. She told me her first thought was wolves. Her second thought was the tether. Both arrived simultaneously, tangled together, because in 93 years of this life, those are the two things that take horses in the night. She pulled the door open. The wind hit her full in the face, a blast so cold it stopped her breath. She could see nothing. The lantern she grabbed from beside the stove threw a circle of yellow light no wider than her outstretched arms. Beyond that circle, the world was white noise. White in color, white in sound, white in meaning. Nothing except the storm.
The tether post was empty. The rope, a braided line of horsehair and sinew, lay coiled in the snow, its end frayed, not chewed, not cut, snapped by the force of an animal lunging against it in panic. Kaidalik was gone. There is a moment in every survival account I have witnessed, and I have witnessed more than I care to count in 30 years reporting from this region, when the person at the center of the story makes a choice that cannot be explained by logic. The mathematics of survival say, stay in the shelter, wait for dawn. The horse has a winter coat, it may endure. You are 93, you will not. Sardaana did not hesitate. She told me this with absolute certainty weeks later, sitting in the hospital in Yakutsk with 4 blackened fingers and a tube in her arm. She said there was no moment of deliberation. The horse was gone. She was going after it. That was all.
People say I am brave. I am not brave. Brave is when you are afraid and you choose. I was not afraid. I was just going. The way you go to your child when it cries. You do not decide. Your body decides.
She dressed in the dark, by feel, inner layer of caribou hide, fur side against the skin, outer layer of reindeer parka, hood drawn tight, the ruff of wolverine fur closing around her face until only her eyes and the bridge of her nose remained exposed. 2 pairs of mittens, inner wool, outer hide. Boots of moose leg skin, the soles stuffed with dried sedge grass for insulation. Every layer mattered. Every gap was a death sentence. She took the lantern. She took a coil of rope. She took a knife. Not for wolves, she said, though wolves were possible. The knife was for cutting Kaitalek free if the horse had tangled itself in scrub or fallen timber. She did not take food. She did not take water. She did not tell anyone where she was going because there was no one to tell. Her nearest neighbor, a herder named Vasily, camped 11 kilometers to the south. Her granddaughter Aina lived in Yakutsk, 400 kilometers away. Sardaana was alone, as she had been alone every winter for the last 9 years, since the arthritis in her hips made the journey to the city impossible, and the stubbornness in her heart made the city irrelevant. She stepped into the storm. The wind was immediate and total, a pressure against her entire body that made each step a negotiation. The snow was knee-deep and still falling. Visibility was less than 3 meters. She could not call for the horse. The wind swallowed everything, and at these temperatures, shouting into the open air risks flash, freezing the throat.
The tracks. They go towards
She followed tracks. Kaitalek's hoofprints were already filling with fresh snow, dissolving like memories. But they were still visible in the lantern light, shallow craters leading northeast, away from the ridge, toward the river valley where the permafrost cracks open in winter and creates hidden crevices beneath the snowpack.
I can't. I won't give up.
Sardaana walked for 40 minutes. Then her left hip gave out. The joint that had been deteriorating for a decade simply refused to bear weight. She went down hard on her right side, the lantern flying from her grip, the flame guttering but somehow surviving in its glass housing. She lay in the snow for what she estimates was 1 full minute. She told me that minute was the longest of her life. The cold pressed against her body from every direction, beneath her, above her, through every seam and fold of clothing. She could feel it reaching for her core, patient and methodical, the way water fills a sinking boat. Then she began to crawl. On her forearms and her right knee, dragging her left leg behind her, the lantern hooked over one wrist, she crawled northeast through the snow. Each meter was a small war. The snow packed into the folds of her sleeves and melted against her skin. Her mittens soaked through. The wind found the gap where her hood met her collar and drove ice crystals against the back of her neck. She crawled for over an hour, more than 300 meters, in darkness, in wind, in a cold so absolute it had become the only fact in the world.
I found you.
She found Kaitalek by sound. Not a scream this time, but a low, rhythmic groaning, the sound a horse makes when it has given up calling for help and is simply enduring.
Hold on, Kaitalek.
The mare lay on her side in a shallow depression where the permafrost had buckled and split beneath the snow. Her left foreleg had punched through a crust of ice into a narrow crevice below, wedged to the knee, twisted at an angle that spoke of a violent, panicked fall. The leg was not broken, though Sardaana could not have known this in the dark. What she knew was simpler and more urgent. The horse was down. The horse was cooling. And a horse that lies in snow at minus 76 degrees will be dead before dawn. Sardaana set the lantern in the snow beside Kaitalek's head. The mare's eye, one great dark eye visible in the amber light, rolled toward her. The pupil was wide with pain and fear, and the white showed at the edges, but when Sardaana placed her hand on the animal's cheek, the eye steadied. The groaning stopped.
I am here. I am here now. Be still.
She could not free the leg alone. She tried. For 20 minutes she dug around the crevice with her knife, chipping at the frozen earth, pulling at the ice with hands she could no longer feel. The leg would not come loose. The crevice held it like a
I
jaw.
will be back. We need.
So she changed her approach. If she could not move the horse, she would keep the horse alive until the storm passed and she could work in daylight. She had done this before, not with a trapped horse, but with a foal born too early in a spring blizzard 40 years ago. The principle is the same. Heat is life. Lose the heat, lose everything. She lay down beside the mare. She pressed her body against the animal's neck and chest, covering as much surface area as she could. She pulled her parka over both of them. It barely stretched, but it created a pocket of shared warmth between her body and the horse's. She wrapped her arms around Kitalik's throat, locked her frozen hands into fists, and held on. The temperature at this point was minus 76. The wind had not eased. The lantern burned for another hour and then went out. The fuel exhausted, and the darkness became absolute. A darkness so complete, she told me it felt like being swallowed. She began to talk.
Keep close,
Not
Kitalik.
loudly!
The wind is hungry tonight.
The cold made
We
even
must
whispering
make it to the
painful.
fire.
She spoke into the horse's ear, her mouth pressed against the coarse winter coat, her words absorbed by the animal's body before the wind could take them.
Do you remember the summer, Kitalik? The summer when the cranes came back and you ran along the river and I thought you would never stop running. You were so young. Your legs were so long. Pyotr would have loved you.
She talked about her husband. She talked about her daughter, who died of tuberculosis in 1987. She talked about the first horse she ever owned, a bay gelding named Sordog, who carried her across the Verkhoyansk range when she was 19. She talked, and the words kept her conscious, and her consciousness kept her body generating heat, and the heat kept them both alive. She does not know when she stopped talking. She does not remember the last thing she said. At some point, the cold won. Not a dramatic surrender, she told me. Just a slow dimming, like a lantern running low, and then nothing. She does not know. The wind and the dark and the two bodies in the snow and nothing else at all.
This is the part of the story where I ask you to sit in that silence for a moment. Not because I'm telling you to feel something, because that silence is what actually happened. For hours, in the coldest night of the Yakutian winter, there was nothing but two heartbeats, one human, one animal, slowing together in the snow. Chapter 6, What the Morning Knew. I found them at 7:14 in the morning. I had ridden out from Vasily's camp after the storm broke, following a hunch and a column of smoke I did not see rising from Sardaana's ridge. The absence of smoke was what moved me. She always has a fire. Always. The tracks were gone. The wind had erased everything. I found them by following the line of the ridge toward the river valley, and by luck, the blind, unearned luck that is the only honest currency in this landscape. The mare lifted her head when I approached. Sardaana did not move. For a span of seconds, I was certain she was dead, and I felt the ground tilt beneath me in a way I have never fully recovered from. Her pulse was 42 beats per minute, hypothermic, dangerously slow, but there. The mare's foreleg was still wedged, but the swelling had kept blood flowing to the limb through the night. I freed the leg in 30 minutes with a cap axe. The horse stood on the third attempt, shaky, lame on the left side, alive. It took Vasily and me 4 hours to transport Sardaana by sled to a point where a helicopter could land. She was airlifted to Yakutsk General Hospital with severe hypothermia, frostbite to both hands and her left ear, and 2 cracked ribs from the fall. Kitalik was walked slowly back to Vasily's camp, where she was stabled and fed. Sardaana spent 11 days in the hospital. She lost the tips of 2 fingers on her left hand and the smallest finger on her right. She told the doctors this was acceptable. She told them she had seen worse.
I have 10 fingers less. 3. I still have the horse. That is not a loss. That is a trade.
She returned to the ridge in February. Kitalik was waiting at Vasily's camp, and Sardaana led her home on foot, 9 kilometers through the snow, the horse walking slowly to match the old woman's pace, the 2 of them moving together like a single creature with 8 legs and one purpose. I'd visited her one last time before I left the region. The shelter was warm. The stove was lit. Kitalik stood outside, her breath rising in steady plumes. I asked Sardaana if she would consider moving to the city to be closer to her granddaughter, to be safe.
She did not answer for a long time. She poured tea. She looked at the photograph of Pyotr and the young horse. Then she spoke. Safe is a word for people who have forgotten what they are keeping alive.
Tea has been poured. Fire burns low.
I nodded. I finished my tea. I left. It was only later, weeks later, when I was already back in Yakutsk writing this account, that Vasily called me. He had gone to check on Sardaana after I left and found the shelter tidy, the stove banked, Kitalik brushed and fed. Everything in order. Everything in its place. And on the sleeping platform, folded beneath the elk pelts where Sardaana slept, he found a letter addressed to her granddaughter, Aina. Dated the night of the blizzard, the night she crawled out into the storm. She had written it before she opened the door, before she laced her boots, before she took the lantern, before she chose the cold over the warmth. She had sat on the edge of her sleeping platform and written a letter to Aina in a hand that shook. You could see it in the script, the trembling lines, the ink pooling where the pen paused. And she had placed it beneath the pelts where it would be found. Vasily read me one line over the phone. Just one. He said the rest was private, and he was right. The one line he read was this. I am going out now. I do not know if I will come back, but the horse cannot die alone. No one should die alone. Sheen to you. She wrote her farewell, folded it with care, tucked it where it would be safe from the cold, and then she opened the door and crawled into minus 76 degrees to save an animal she loved, fully aware that the snow might be the last thing she ever felt. Sardaana. Alexeyeva has survived 93 winters on the coldest inhabited land on Earth. She has buried a husband, a daughter, and more animals than she can remember. She has lost fingers to the frost and years to the silence. She is not brave, she says. She is just going. I was the one who found her in the snow that morning. I saw her arms locked around that horse's neck. I saw the frost in her hair and the blood on her lips and the way the mare's eye was still watching her, even in the cold, even in the dark, as if the animal understood exactly who had come and exactly what it cost her. The tundra takes everything eventually. The cold does not negotiate. It does not care what you love or why. Yet on one night in January, at minus 76, an old woman decided that the cold was wrong, that there was something it could not take, not from her, not yet. And she crawled 300 meters through the snow to prove it. She left a letter because she expected to die. She survived because she refused to. That is not endurance. That is something older, something the tundra has never learned to freeze.